you have not been following doggo speech, the words might be doing you a heckin' bamboozle. So as we all know, dogs are the only thing that matters, and they have a language attached to them. A flooferino can do a mlim or receive pats, and a very good boy often merits 13 out of 10 ratings. So why are there so many new words for dogs? Wittgenstein was this philosopher of language, and he said that if we were to ever speak to a lion, we wouldn't be able to understand him. And this isn't just because it would be hard to understand his roars, it's because his brain would actually operate in a way that we wouldn't be able to get. There's this thing called the Sphere-Whorf hypothesis, which coincidentally is one of the hardest to pronounce hypotheses, and it says that people who speak one language cannot understand the thoughts of people who speak in another. Benjamin Whorf told us that if your language does not have a word for a concept, you cannot understand a concept. And it is easy to know immediately that this hypothesis is garbage. Like once upon a time you were a child, and you saw a banana for the first time, and you were like, what's that? And your mom was like, that's a banana. And you were like, this is a banana? And you obviously didn't need to have the concept of banana in your head before you were able to see a banana. But that is not to say that language doesn't affect how we think. Language doesn't constrain how we think, but it does force us to think about some things more than others. So Mandarin does not require verbs to be conjugated. So you don't have to say, I jumped, I will jump, I am jumping. Instead, you can just use the same word for jump for everything. And that means that Mandarin speakers don't have to constantly think about time when they're speaking. English speakers obviously do. We say, I jumped, I will jump. So whenever we speak, we have to be considering time, or we will not be grammatically correct. And likewise, English speakers do not have to think about gender, but Spanish and German speakers do. If you're a Spanish speaker and you're thinking about a chair, you have to think about the fact that a chair is la silla, which is feminine, and that means you're forced to consider gender a lot more. And you might say, Darcy, is there any actual evidence for this? And yes, there is. There was a study done in which German and Spanish speakers talked about keys. Keys are masculine in German, but feminine in Spanish. German speakers describe the keys as hard and useful, both of which might be considered masculine characteristics. But Spanish speakers, when they looked at the exact same key, said that they were tiny and delicate and intricate. So even if your language is not preventing you from learning things, it is definitely changing your reality. Back to dogs, because dogs are the best thing and everything else is secondary. When we call a dog small instead of small, or we say they're doing a blim and not just licking their noses, we're actually recognizing that they have different brains than we do. We know that, like Wittgenstein's lion, they would not be able to understand us if we spoke to them, and we would not understand them if they spoke to us, because we know that our thoughts are not the same. But we figure if we change our language, then maybe we could understand their thoughts. So we can actually tell what our thoughts about dogs are by examining the language that we created for them. This dog is scared, but this dog is doing this other dog a frighten, and that's a completely different thing. If someone is doing you a frighten, that's a social action. You're interacting with someone else and you're getting frightened. Or look at this meme of a doggo and a froggo. A froggo explains to the doggo that he's a froggo, and the dog says, you're doing me an educate. And it's true, that froggo is doing him an educate. So what we might say by looking at these two memes is that dog language is inherently social. It relies on interactions with other people. And that makes sense as the way that we are conceptualized dogs, because dogs are really social animals. Dogs don't get confused, but they do get bamboozled, which is a way more whimsical word than confused. And from that we know that we think dogs are much more whimsical than we are. Dogs cannot swear, but they can say heck. Sometimes the word heck is too overpowering for them, and they're forced to blot part of it out. And from that we know that dogs are way less offensive and more wholesome than we are. So the word doggo, which was the first of all woofer-related words, started really being big on the internet in 2016, which, if you remember correctly, was when our most polarizing ever election happened. We realized that the country was really divided, and it made all of us real sad. One of the first places the word doggo was ever spotted was in a Facebook group called Dog Spotting. Dog Spotting is a game with fairly simple rules. You have to take pictures of dogs, and depending on the amount of dogs you take pictures of and the goodness of the boys, you get points. Dog spotters are not allowed to post any politically polarizing content. So if you take a picture of a dog at a political rally, you can't include any signs. There's also a don't drive and spot rule, which means that everyone is constantly discouraged from taking pictures of floofers while driving. When people break the rules, they come back in through a process called the Dog Spotting People's Court, in which they're told that they're very good boys and they shouldn't break rules again. So dog spotting culture is overwhelmingly wholesome. Dog spotting culture uses a lot of doggo speak, like mlim and woofer and boofer. So my theory regarding language and dogs is this. Whenever we change our language, we're forced to change how we think. So if we have to describe things in dog terms, like doing a mlim instead of licking one's nose, we think more in that context. So it's a great escape sometimes to think of pepperonis. It might be real comforting to say heck instead of something stronger. When we code switch into dog speech, we're creating this mentally safer environment for ourselves. If you enjoyed this rant about dogs and language, please subscribe and have a hecking good day.